Alright everyone, it's time for the Occult number 319, Don't Follow a Leader. Now I'm talking about this mainly in the spiritual context, in the context of occultism itself, as opposed to the political context, of course, well, I guess you could term me a libertarian or constitutionalist or whatever the hell it is at this point. Libertarian Party, definitely not. I don't really believe in authoritative, strong leadership. I believe that people generally should be left alone. They should lead themselves. In an occult context, though, it's even arguably more important, because if you're going to search for wisdom, if you're trying to search for that which is hidden, you can't really have a leader. I think that it is objectively a bad idea generally to subjugate oneself to like a guru, priest, or pope, or whatever, imams and rabbis, because these people, they have their own limited analysis and interpretation of knowledge. You're not adding anything to the bulk of human knowledge by simply repeating what somebody else has said. It's in questioning and examining things, doing your own analysis, that these things sort of happen. There's a cat hair floating around trying to distract the video. This is what my spiritual journey has become over time. Of course, I've spoken about my upbringing, marginal Christian, sort of going to church on Easter Sunday and Christmas. That was it. Becoming a bit more religious later on, technically a religious Christian for some time, adopting atheism, and in all of these different stages, there are, if not leaders that you're following, at least sort of centralized sources of information. So for a Christian, it's the Bible, essentially, and the various interpretations of the Bible. For atheistic Satanism, again, there are a bunch of the satanic rules of the earth and so forth. You don't really have to follow them. That's not really ultimately the point. The point technically is liberating one's spiritual journey, but it's so anti-spiritual and literally there's a pejorative for people that are involved in magic, etc. among atheistic Satanists, occultniks, they call them. Atheism has a host of basic beliefs, and of course the main core belief is simply, hey, I don't believe in God. I became more apatheistic over time, don't really care. But there are figures within atheism, influencers, something like Dawkins or whatever, that people tend to, if not venerate and follow, at least absorb preferentially sort of that material. Within the occult, in the more broad sense, the whole goal is simply to search. It's not really to find an end. It's to dedicate one's time, spend one's life searching. That's the whole thing. If you talk about the bulk of human knowledge, I like to believe that the vast core of things that can be known, can be studied, can be analyzed and debated over, we haven't even scratched the surface of these things. What mainstream religion and what leaders typically do is give you a small kernel of analysis that in many cases they got in turn from another person and they got it from another person, and it slowly morphs maybe over time, especially in regards to the socio-political climate. Christianity now is not practiced the same even by religious Christians that it was a couple hundred years ago. The idea of Christianizing the savages, subjugating the pagans or whatever, sort of has gone the way of the dinosaur. The same is true in most mainline religions. It's, I suppose, mostly absent in Islam at this point. But these things, again, they have their books. They have their central figures. In some cases, there's a socio-political overlap with that. And that's, if anything, anti-occult in nature. The idea of going to the guru, getting knowledge from them, all you're doing is replicating knowledge that has already been made. It's already been discussed, analyzed, interpreted, written down usually in a book, and you're just taking that and you're replicating it. It's sort of like a meme, if you think about it that way. The occult is more about you delve into these things. This is why I've said, for many people in this world, occultism is not really for them. So for some of you, the occult's not for you. You prefer a prepackaged religion. You prefer somebody else to give you that knowledge, and you shop around, of course, generally speaking, unless you're raised quite religious, in which case you simply replicate that because of fear of hell or suffering or whatever, or in some cases fear of being killed for having a heretical or unorthodox belief. But you can shop around, and in more liberal societies, and you can say, well, these are the teachings of this church and that temple and this mosque and stuff, and I've chosen this particular religious edifice, this subdivision of Christianity, this version of Islam, this type of Judaism, this particular pagan cult, and you've taken that. You've made a choice, certainly, involved with that if you've been doing the shopping around for religion thing, but you're still just inculcating analysis and knowledge, and in some cases it's not even real, from other paths, from other people. Again, this is the opposite of what the occult would stress. The occult would stress going into all of these groups, not shopping around and saying, well, I found my book, I found my God, I found my end-all be-all, but analyzing it yourself, interpreting it yourself, doing the legwork. Again, why it's not for everyone. Most people, they don't have the time, they don't have the energy, and they don't have the ambition to do such a thing. They're not interested in doing their own analysis. They want some divine truth, and they want it to be brought to them. And this is why convert seeking is a thing. This is why a million different religions contact me all the time online and say, oh, you should turn to Jesus. Oh, here's the truth of Islam. Here's top 10 reasons you should adopt Buddhism. This still happens. It was more common maybe years ago when religious communities really got an early start on places like YouTube and Facebook. It's a little bit more tame now than it was in the past. I love it when people talk about, oh, the bullying's out of control online. Weird shit is all over the internet. Oh, you should have seen the internet in the late 2000s. You did, but you probably weren't in the right places to have understood this. The occult, therefore, is different from religion. You could almost say that the occult is separate from religion, although religious study, especially the history of religion, some of the beliefs and practices are definitely a topic of interest. But it goes beyond that. It goes into experimental psychology, physics, chemistry, the occult involved with alchemy, its transformation into proto-science, you could call it, in the Renaissance, and thence into what we would call, quote-unquote, modern science today. These things were all influenced heavily by spirituality, but they were almost never influenced in their progression over time by mainline Orthodox religion. If you look, it's the history of persecution is the history of the occult leading science through the Renaissance, through the basically the era of the early printing press for several hundred years, even through colonialism. A lot of spiritual systems, analysis, the study of religion were intertwined directly with the advance of Western society, and it wasn't led by people who had orthodox religious views, typically. The orthodox religious views get challenged over and over because of their preconceived set of conceptions that they have, because they have their book, but then part of their book is nullified because we find out that some historical event it claims happened didn't. It claims that someone who existed never existed. It claims that some miraculous power that can be harnessed, here's the way to develop telekinesis, and we find out that that doesn't actually work because people have read that book, tried the method over and over and over again, and it doesn't work. There are still yogis today among Hindus and other mystic groups associated with that, some semi-heretical offshoots, of course, that claim that they can teach you how to levitate. Well, you can look at the story of Apollonius and you can find that levitation is literally alluded to by Philostratus in antiquity 2,000 years ago, using the same sort of trick methods. Snake charming, levitation, the ability of things to be moved with one's mind. But these things are still, in some cases, codified. They might even fall out of use in mainline religious edifices, but continue. And if you take that prepackaged religion or dogma or yogi, his teachings or whatever, you can inculcate things that are straight up bullshit. Well, that's not the search for truth. It's an attempt to find truth, but oftentimes the truth morphs over time anyway. The occult has no problem with this, compensates for it by saying, well, it doesn't matter if we've disproven this element of magic, this part of history that we formerly believed in, we can just reanalyze and reinterpret. It's almost scientific in the way that it happens. So what I would say within the occult, if you're interested in occultism, you shouldn't have any leader. It doesn't matter if they're there are people that watch my occult videos, like you're doing now, and enjoy the content. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree. That's the whole point. You don't have to agree. You can disagree with this and say, no, I think it's fine to have a yogi. or I'm led by a sect of Brahmin or a rabbinical council or something. Perfectly fine. That's your opinion. I would just warn you that you're subjugating yourself to others, and that's not the occult. You're not doing the legwork specifically yourself. I see that as spiritually unhelpful, the same way in politics I would see it with authoritarianism. It doesn't help anyone. It's the old way of doing things. That's about all. Peace out.